Hi everyone, my name's Emily. It's been a while, but I wanted to share my favorite books of 2021. To make it clear, these are my favorite books that I've personally read in 2021, not books that have necessarily come out in 2021, because some of these are quite old, but I did just read them now because I am always late on the train. These are in no particular order. I don't think I could accurately put my ratings of these books in order just because I've read some of them more recently. One of them I finished literally like 2 days ago, so I don't want to have that kind of bias because it's more fresh in my mind. But anyway, the first book I want to mention is Parachutes by Kelly Yang. Y'all have heard me rave about this book a bajillion times already, so I don't even think that I need to explain, but this book is about a teenage girl from Shanghai. This is also a young adult, by the way. It follows a teenage girl from Shanghai coming to, I think, Los Angeles, Southern California, somewhere here. And she lives here for school. I remember loving this so much. I actually have a reading vlog where I read this book and it was phenomenal. It talks so much about Asian culture, also being Asian American, and in that, like, being born in the United States versus being born in Asia. Please look at the trigger warnings before you read this book because there are a couple of sensitive topics in here. Just in case anything happens, please read the trigger warnings. I guess I'll just go with the young adult books first then. The next one is Blackout by Danielle Clayton, Tiffany D. Jackson, Nick Stone, Angie Thomas, Ashley Woodfolk, and Nicola Yoon. I read this one in my 24-hour readathon video and it blew me away. It's super short. I tabbed it because I loved it so much, and I need more from every single one of these authors. This book takes place in New York during a blackout, and it's a bunch of different love stories. There's some LGBTQ plus rep in here as well. It follows all black characters, I'm pretty sure. I think 90% of the characters in here were black. I think there was a school tour guide. I think she was white. I'm not sure, but most of the characters in this book are black, and it was so good. Like, the tagline is, "Even love stories can glow when the lights go." It's so cute. I love how all of the love stories came together in the end, and it's definitely one that is super memorable for me. Definitely one of my favorites for this year, and I want to read more from all of these authors sometime soon, hopefully next year. The next book I read, I don't really know if this is young adult, I'm pretty sure it is, but it's Sadie by Courtney Summers. This was such a hard-hitting book. I listened on audiobook, and if you are ever gonna read this book, I highly recommend the audiobook. It reminded me a lot of the Good Girls Guide to Murder series a little bit, just because we're looking for this missing girl named Sadie, and it kind of follows a podcast as well. Sadie's sister was murdered and she's trying to avenge her sister, figure out what happened, and then Sadie goes missing, and the podcast guy, his name is Wes McCrae, I don't even remember, but his name was Wes McCrae. He goes and tries to track Sadie and tries to follow her and eventually find her. This book was absolutely phenomenal. Please read trigger warnings before you read this one as well, because this one has a lot of heavy content in it, but it is so good and so important. The next books I'm mentioning are actually in a trilogy, and I just finished it recently, but it's the Good Girls Guide to Murder trilogy by Holly Jackson. This is the one that I just mentioned about Sadie, but these books were absolutely phenomenal. I was not expecting to love them that much. The first one I read in less than 24 hours during a live stream. I actually ended the live stream and I just kept reading and reading. I slept and then I immediately started reading again when I woke up, and I finished the book, and it is so good, so like fast paced, and it just goes by so quickly. It follows a girl named Pip, and she's trying to solve the mystery of a girl from her small little town in Connecticut, I believe. It was ruled that this girl, her name's Andy, she was murdered by her boyfriend named Sal. Pip personally doesn't think that that's actually what happened, so she's trying to prove Sal innocent and figure out what actually happened and get to the bottom of the case. And the reason she's doing this is for her senior project. Something about being a senior and she has to do a project. And then the second book Good Girl, Bad Blood gets even better. More twists, more things happen, and I did not see the ending coming. Just reading from her perspective, from Pip's perspective when everything goes down. Oh my gosh, oh my gosh. And then the last book, As Good as Dead, I actually have mixed feelings on. I listened to this on audiobook. The only drawback from listening on audiobook is that you can't really see the pictures and the photos. Like halfway through the book, something happens and I thought it was kind of off and it was kind of out of character, but it was still good. And I still like, I'm still having mixed feelings about it, but it was definitely still one of my favorites from this year, just this whole trilogy. I was not bored the whole entire time I was reading this trilogy. No matter how I feel about like the plot and what happened, it was still super interesting and fast-paced, and if you need something to get you out of a reading slump, please read this trilogy because it was so good. Fair warning though, it does get dark. There is murder and some of the scenes can get very graphic. Please read the trigger warnings for those books because it can get pretty dark as well. Next we're gonna go into new adult. The first is the Off-Campus series by Elle Kennedy. Definitely one of my favorites. My favorite is the score. I actually got like 100 pages into The Goal, which is the last book in the series, and I DNF'd it, but I do think that I'm going to go back and finish it. I just wasn't in the right headspace for the book. So I might start it over, I might pick up where I left off, we'll see, but I do plan on reading it next year, hopefully sometime in January before school gets too crazy. I'm not gonna go into it because everyone knows what these are about. It's like a hockey new adult romance, but for a particular order, this one is my favorite, The Deal is my second favorite, and The Mistake is my third favorite. As of right now, The Goal is in last place for me, but like I didn't finish it, but like I DNF'd it, you know what I mean? But we'll see if things change. The next book on my favorites list is Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I didn't think I would like this book that much. I was actually thinking maybe I won't read this one, maybe I'm just not into it, I don't know, it just doesn't seem like my vibe. I'm not a historical fiction type of person, even though this wasn't that long ago, but like, oh my gosh, after I read this book, there aren't any tabs in here, but I listened to the audiobook and I screenshotted every single part where I wanted to highlight something, but I just have to go back to the audiobook and then play it and then highlight everything, but there were just so many, so I'm like, I keep putting it off. But this book is so good. I honestly like this one better than The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. It's told in interviews, and it just follows this girl named Daisy who is a singer in LA, and she meets the Six, which is this up-and-coming band, and they end up teaming together and becoming a whole band, and they're called Daisy Jones and the Six. I don't know what else to tell you without spoiling because there's just so much. It's so good to go into this blind because it's fun to be surprised, and I don't want to tell you anymore, but definitely 5 out of 5 stars. One of my favorites of this year.
Hi, so I totally forgot to mention some of the things about this book that I think are important to go into with. Sorry if you hear background noises, I have family over, but it highlights a lot of important values about family, about loyalty, about morals, about honesty, and I just think it's such an important book to read just going into life, especially as you start a family, as you go into your 20s or 30s. There were just so many life lessons and messages that were dispersed throughout the whole novel that you can see throughout different characters and their character development and the things that happen to them that I just think are important as you go through life.
And the last new adult, I feel like Daisy Jones is adult. Or is it new adult? I don't know. But I'm just gonna put it with new adult. But the last new adult book that I have is The Love Hypothesis by Allie Hazelwood. I finished this one like 2 days ago and I'm still thinking about it. I need more from Allie Hazelwood. I need more from Adam and Olive. I need more. I cannot get enough of this book. I'm probably gonna reread it right away because I loved it so much. There was just like the cute scenes, like I was actually laughing out loud with this book. This and all of the off-campus books made me actually laugh out loud. This one, I've never physically laughed from books until this year, until I read these. Like, in the beginning, I was kind of skeptical about it. I kind of wasn't feeling it too much, but then once I hit like 70 pages or 100 pages, then I was like, okay, I'm 100% into this book, and I could not stop reading it. It was so good. I was actually at the laundromat and I was doing the laundry. The 30 minutes passed by so fast, and I was like, okay, I guess I need to go home and finish this entire book. The cute little hypothesis things at the beginning of every chapter, I love them so much. I love Olive and Adam's banter. I love their conversation. I love how they mess around with each other and they joke with each other. I just love it so much. Please read The Love Hypothesis if you haven't already, please. And apparently this was Star Wars fan fiction. Obviously this is Daisy Ridley and this is Adam Driver, which I think is funny because his name is Adam in the book. I just love this book so much. Please read it. It was fantastic. And then lastly, I have my adult books. 2 of these are like suspense, thriller, mystery, but one of them is fantasy. I'm gonna say fantasy, but it's The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. Oh my gosh, this book is ginormous. How big is this thing? It's like 530 pages, but I flew through it so quickly. I was not expecting to go through it so fast. I am not used to finishing 500-page books in less than a week. Those usually take me like 2, especially if they're fantasy or something like that. Addie LaRue makes a deal with like a devil sort of figure. She basically can live forever, but no one can remember her and no one knows her name. No one can remember her at all. So basically every time she turns away from someone or they stop talking to her, then they immediately forget her. So that's her curse, but this follows 300 years after she made that deal. I'm a little bit iffy about the ending, but I still really enjoyed it. It's still something that stuck out to me. If you want to hear more of my thoughts, look for one of my wrap-ups where I talk about this one. I've talked about my thoughts on this book a couple of times already, so please go back to those videos to hear what I have to say. The next book is The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides. Every time someone asks me for a thriller or like a mystery, psychological thriller, I always recommend this one. The Silent Patient is definitely one of my new favorite books. This one messed me up so bad. I flew through it so quickly, and the plot twist is mind-blowing. If you have not read this one yet, please do. This one follows a man named Theo, is that his name? And he's a criminal psychotherapist. He tries to get to the bottom of the story of Alicia. She's a famous painter who shot her husband in the face 5 times and has never said a word since. So he's trying to figure out why she did it. No one's been able to get to the bottom of it because she is just refusing to talk. And then lastly on this list is one that I've also recently read, which is The Last Thing He Told Me by Laura Dave. This one was a very pleasant surprise. Phenomenal writing, phenomenal audiobook. I did listen to this one, and this is one of Reese Witherspoon's book club picks. Let me tell you, that last line in this book messed me up so bad. The last sentence in this book was heartbreaking. I actually shed a tear, and I don't normally cry for books. I actually shed a tear at the end. It was so captivating, and I never wanted to stop reading or listening to the audiobook. I listened to a lot of audiobooks this year, I guess, especially during school, because that was kind of the only way I could read, because I was always doing homework and stuff. So while I was driving to school or whatever, I would put on an audiobook. This one was one of my favorites, one of my absolute favorites. This one, and then Sadie that I mentioned earlier. This follows a woman named Hannah and her husband Owen. All of a sudden, Owen disappears and he leaves a note to Hannah saying, "Protect her," referring to his daughter and her stepdaughter Bailey. And then Hannah and Bailey try to figure out what's going on, where Owen is, and if they can find him, and if he'll come back, and if he's possibly dead, and what just happened to him. And yeah, those are my favorite books from 2021. Please leave a comment down below and tell me which books you read this year were your favorite. I'd love to hear for some good recommendations. I would love to hear your thoughts on the books that I mentioned today. And yeah, I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye!